Ba weep Granagh weep Nini Bong! Welcome back Autobuddies and Decepticons to Transformers AutoBook Club, a weekly video and podcast series where we read and deep dive into one issue or story per week from Marvel's Transformers comics. I'm Gary, your hostbot, and I'm back from my trip to Korea. I had a lovely, relaxing time, ate a lot of food, did a little bit of running, wrote some notes, played some video games. It was great. My batteries are recharged, and I'm a little bit ahead of where I need to be now in terms of notes. I also got some images done, so hopefully, I've got a rein on this now, and I can stay ahead. At least that's the plan. You know how those things go. While I've been away, there's been a little bit of Transformers news that I'm excited about. It is a non-stop machine. Transformers just come out all the time, and there's new figures and new announcements pretty much every couple of days, I think. Something new is announced or shown off. So that's why at the beginning of the show here, I only really talk about the ones that I'm interested in, because I'm not a big figure guy, and if I talked about every figure that was announced, one, it would take a lot of time, and two, I wouldn't know what I was talking about, to be honest with you. But a company called Monstercat Toys announced a really cute chibi Optimus Prime, and it's not like it doesn't look deformed. It's not like a Funko Pop or a Lego Transformer. It's like just a small, cute version of Prime. There's some images here that they've uploaded to their Weibo account, and I don't think this thing has been made yet, but it's adorable. I want to pick this up if I can, if it's not too expensive. I would love to have this thing. It's so cute. Speaking of cute, there's a Japanese company whose website is kujiko.com, which is ichiban. Kuji is a kind of lottery that they do for lots of popular franchises here in Japan. And basically it's like you buy a ticket, and that ticket guarantees you a prize, but it's from any of a set number of tier of prizes. And then usually there's like a top tier, which is like the best prize that everybody wants, but of course there's very few of those prizes. And then down to a bottom tier, which is not usually that great. But the tickets always cost the same amount, so it's a real gamble. They've done these for some other stuff that I like too, but there's been a Berserk one, and what I tend to do is just wait for them to be finished and buy the thing that I want from a reuse site, because it's just kind of the only way to ensure that you get the thing that you're actually after. And for me, it's not usually the top prize. I usually want something that's smaller, and the same is true of this one. The top prize this time is a tote bag, which doesn't seem that thrilling to me. And then lots of the prizes are acrylic stands, which I won't go into too much, but they're a big thing these days. I don't know why. It's just, instead of figures now, lots of series and anime, especially here, have these acrylic stands, which are just plastic pictures that you can stand up on a little, like, base. I don't see the appeal of them at all, to be honest with you, but lots of people do. But they do have a set of can badges, too, which I want one of, which is this adorable Grimlock. I've never seen Grimlock look so cute. I really want this thing. But there are tons of prizes, so I think the likelihood of actually getting this one, if I pay the 850 yen it costs to buy one ticket, is extremely low, so I'm going to wait and see if I can find it elsewhere. While I was in Korea, I happened to see some knockoff Transformers in a supermarket, and I really had a good time looking at these. These are really fun. I was tempted to buy them, to be honest, because they look pretty good. One is clearly supposed to be Optimus Prime. It looks pretty much, exactly like Optimus Prime to me, though my eyes are quite untrained in these things. And there's also one, the same, shape, but it's in purple, which I think is a bit like the Shattered Glass Optimus Prime, so it really looks like they've just looked at Transformers toys and tried to make replicas of those. But I was amused by the thing at the bottom that says 2-in-1 deformation. Deformation is not a word, I think, that goes with this toy. And also in the top left here, it's called a Transmaster, so that's fun. And there's another one here that's supposed to be Starscream, I guess. It looks almost exactly like Starscream. The only reason I didn't come home with these was because there was not a price listed on the back, and I didn't want to try and ask in Korean how much these things cost, because I don't speak word one of Korean. Besides, hello and thank you. That's all I've got for you in terms of Transformers stuff before we get into the story for today this week. So I guess let's roll right on into our story for today, which is Shooting Star. So right before we start, this one, I'm going to have to do a disclaimer, because this is going to be a really weird episode. Because it's the first one of these comics, out of all of them, which I've read, that I would say overall I just didn't like. That hasn't happened before, and I don't feel like I can just pretend to have enthusiasm for something that I don't, because I just feel like that's disingenuous and it's not me. But I also want to not skip it. So you'll see why as we go along, why I had so much distaste for this one. And even as I was reading it for the first time, I was really already thinking like, oh no, how am I going to do this on the podcast? And how am I going to make a video about this? So I even tried looking up ways to spice up dry explanations of how to present information that is not so interesting in a way that makes it more interesting. But all the advice that I found was like, make it relatable, frame it as a story. But this is already a story, so I'm going to cover it in my usual style as much as I can. But this story just falls into an unfortunate category. If something is really silly, I can often enjoy it for that and find, enjoyment and humor in something that's not taking itself too seriously and isn't very good. And if it's engaging and exciting, then of course it's easy to get into. But this one just doesn't check either one of those boxes. So while it is very weird, I just couldn't latch on to anything to let me enjoy this one. Even worse is the comic itself hyped this one up as the weirdest Transformers story yet, and that is just false. It's not true. And that's perhaps not in the way that you might be expecting too. I really feel like this episode is me providing a service. Like, I've read this and I can explain it to you so that you don't have to read this one for yourself. I feel so crappy about opening an episode with an avalanche of negativity, but by the end, I hope you'll see where I'm coming from. Once I explain, if by that point you even need it explained, the crux of why this issue fell flatter than a Sharktacon who had the misfortune to occupy a space in front of a door that Slag wants to use, for me. So all that said, let's get into it and try and enjoy it as much as we can. The cover is pretty much setting up what's going to happen in this issue for us. There's a mystery arm holding a gun, and in the background there are some police officers and 2 tanks and some people on the ground. And it kind of throws together elements of the story, so it represents what's going to happen well enough. And at the bottom here, it says, The Menace of Megatron. This is issue number 13. They say unlucky for some, and I guess that is true in this case. So it opens with a splash page. And in the foreground, we can see a sweating and panicking guy in a green suit running through a trash-laden river. While in the background, we can see what he's running from. 2 other gangsters are in suits, aiming guns and firing at him. They're gonna kill me, he says aloud. And he says that the only thing that could help him now is a miracle. A little white box once again claims that this is the most offbeat Transformers story yet, which it is not. It's just not. But it says that it's brought to us by, and then below at the bottom, as usual, are the credits. Bob Budiansky made the peculiar decision to write this story. Don Perlin did the pencils. Al Gordon was on ink. Janice Chiang was the letterer, and Nel Yomtov is on colors as always. Michael Carlin was the editor, and then Jim Shooter is editor-in-chief at Marvel. As he runs through the garbage and water, the guy in the green suit falls face first into the river, and a very large rat runs away behind him there. The 2 gangsters catch up with him and taunt him. They call him Joey, and they tell him running from them is a bad idea, and so was failing to pay someone they call Lomax, the protection money that he owes them. Joey stammers that he had intended to pay Lomax, but some emergency bills came up, so he needs a bit more time. The gangsters reply that Lomax doesn't expect Joey to care about his problems, so surely Joey doesn't expect Lomax to care about his. One of the gangsters says that if Joey didn't use the money he owes to Lomax to bet on horses, then maybe next time these kinds of emergency bills won't come up. And the guy in the blue suit kicks Joey, making him fall back into the filthy water again. One or other of them says that there's not even going to be a next time for Joey Slick. On his front, in the water, Joey notices something just below the surface. He thinks, that gun? The purple-suited gangster says, so long, Joey, so it's clear they're about to kill him for what he's done. So Joey, thinking that they'll never expect what he's about to do, sits up and reaches behind himself for the gun he found in the water. He aims and fires at the men, but all that comes out from the gun is a click. The 2 gangsters look at him in a stunned silence for a second, before bursting into laughter. The guy in blue says that the gun is jammed, and the other is surprised that a wimp like Joey would even be carrying a gun in the first place. And he guffaws. Joey stammers that he just found the gun. Blue Suit says that it stands to reason that a loser like Joey would also find a loser of a gun too. And Purple Suit says maybe they'll let him keep his gun and die a hero. I wasn't sure what he meant there, actually. Maybe he'll look more heroic if he dies with a gun because it suggests that he at least tried to put up a fight? I don't know. The guy in blue addresses the gun directly. So he calls it gun, and he tells it that from their current positions, it can't miss him. So it can go ahead and blast him to show everyone that Joey is a tough guy. Purple guffaws again. But then there's a scrack, and Joey says, huh? The art shows that his finger is clearly not touching the trigger, as a purple laser fires from the gun, hitting both of the gangsters, knocking them off their feet, and even knocking off their sunglasses. Smoke rises from the gun, and Joey inspects it, wondering what just happened because he didn't even pull the trigger. Realizing that he seems to have just killed 2 of Lomax's men, he says he has to get out of there, and he runs off, leaving them in the river. 30 minutes later, he reaches some kind of run-down barn, and there are holes in the roof and bales of straw inside, along with straw all over the floor. Joey needs to rest and collect his thoughts. He looks at and talks to the gun, saying that it looks like a gun, but he's never seen a gun do what this thing just did. So what are you? He asks aloud. But the gun pulls itself from its hand, and he says, huh? As the gun transforms and changes size into the huge form of Megatron. Light from those holes in the roof comes in like a spotlight, illuminating Megatron. And I'll give it credit where it's due, that's pretty cool. Joey yells, "Holy smokes!" in surprise, and Megatron replies that the answer to Joey's question is this: I am Megatron. There's something I want to say here, but I think I'm going to just leave it till later because I want to get through this, and then maybe later I can talk about why I didn't quite gel with this. But just know at this point I'm holding my tongue. The gangsters get names here, Whitey and Marco, who Joey says must have killed him. He must be dead, and Megatron must be some kind of weird angel. What a leap. Megatron replies, no, he's not dead, and he himself is not an angel, he's a transformer. He literally says that. I'm not an angel, I'm a transformer. Joey asks, what's a transformer? Where did you come from? Megatron explains about the war, the Decepticons' plans to take over Earth and all its resources, the Autobots, and how in his last memory, Ratchet knocked him off a cliff, at which time he transformed into his gun mode, which is smaller and lighter, to avoid any major damage. But he makes sure to mention that the fall was enough to damage his cerebral circuitry. His brain is scrambled, and he can no longer think for himself. He can only do what he is told or asked. So that's the contrivance of this issue, and our explanation as to why Megatron has no choice but to allow what follows in the remainder of this issue to happen. Joey asks for clarification. Is Megatron saying that he has to do whatever he tells him to? Megatron replies simply, yes. And Joey, one eyebrow cocked, looks out at us from the final panel, deviously rubbing his chin. And his hairline seems to have receded quite far in this panel. Later, 40 miles away, at a fancy private estate in, where else? Oregon. A voice yells, you let him escape! So we can guess it's Lomax, who had sent his debt collection goons to find Joey. He continues, yelling at the two men, who are standing in front of him, with two others standing beside him, while he sits in a chair by a pool. A bikini-clad woman is standing on the diving board too, with her arms up, about to dive. He's mad that his debt collectors have failed to get him his money, and worse, let someone get away. If his underlings make him look foolish like this, it's going to damage his reputation and ruin his operations in this town, which is Portland, Oregon. I only know Portland as like a place with a reputation for being trendy and artsy, so I kind of wondered if there was a lot of organized crime going on there. But it's a port city, so yeah, lots of underworld stuff goes on there. I didn't know that. One of the gangsters we saw before explains that Joey hit them with some kind of lightning bolt, and Lomax comes back with his zinger. If the pair of them let Joey Slick get away again, they're going to find out that lightning can strike twice, right between their eyes. That was a pretty good one. Behind them, we can see the woman's legs and a splash of water as she dives into the pool. And then in the foreground of the next panel, she's getting out of the pool, on her knees and leaning forward in just such a provocative pose there. Lomax continues his ranting in the background, saying that he didn't put all his hard work into building his criminal operations just to let punks like Slick walk all over him. There's a close-up of his face in the next panel, and he reminds me of J. Jonah Jameson. He has those wildly bushy eyebrows with those kind of hooks at the end, and he's clenching his fist up by his face, and he has a moustache, though it's longer than Jameson's. His hair is white, and it's slicked back, and again, it's longer than Jameson's too. He yells, he should be giving me respect, not ulcers. Lomax is pretty funny. I kind of like Lomax. He ends his speech with a yell, telling them to take care of Slick. All four of the goons leave, agreeing to do as they've been told, and the diving woman drapes herself on Lomax, kissing him on the cheek. She tells him that she respects him, but he says, keep your respect, Charlene. Stop dripping on me. So Lomax is coming off like a crotchety but funny crime boss. Someone who's getting older. He's established his empire, and now he wants it just to run as smoothly as possible so we can just relax. You might remember Michael and I discussed Circuit Breaker and her costume in quite a bit of detail when we saw her. This time with Charlene here, I feel a bit different, because we actually know less about her, and for some reason that makes it feel like she's of age because she's hanging around with a crime boss in the middle of the day. She comes off to me like a casual girlfriend of his that he keeps about the place, and not someone he's overly concerned with pampering. She seems fond of him, or at least willing to put up that appearance too, so yeah, while I don't feel like we need women in bikinis in Transformers comics, this one I just think it's not too distasteful or dissimilar to what you might see in a gangster movie. Yeah, it's a little bit gratuitous, but the context on this one makes me feel like it's just less questionable than Circuit Breaker, or when we saw Jessie and her friends in those leotards way back when. We're in the southwest of Portland now, and Joey complains internally that it took him a long time to hitch a ride back here, but he had to come and sort some things out. So he's broke and he had to hitchhike. A man with a questionable accent stops him and asks what's the matter. He walked right by without saying hello to his old friend. He's a young man, and it's not good for him to have so many worries. Joey replies with, "Hi, Mr. Kim." So it seems like he's an older Korean man running a greengrocer. Joey agrees with Mr. Kim about his worries, and Mr. Kim gives him an apple, saying that it will help him think clearer and remember his friends. Joey politely tries to decline, but Mr. Kim insists, smiling. So Joey accepts the apple, and he thanks him. Mr. Kim's accent is... well, I feel like I actually can't comment on it, really. Like, on one hand, you can say it's a slightly racist parody. On the other, it's not egregious, and I don't feel like it's mocking either. And I don't think it's a very unrealistic representation of somebody speaking English as a second language. The character is a nice guy, too, from the small amount we've seen of him. As much as I'd like to be aware and sensitive of these sorts of things, I can see this particular instance being totally subjective. Myself, I can see it both ways, and I can't really pick a side. I just don't feel like I'm qualified. Moments later, as he continues walking home, some kids throw an American football to Joey. He catches it, playfully telling Clyde, the kid who threw it, to warn him next time. He says his reflexes aren't what they used to be, and he throws the ball back to Clyde, who has to jump backward a bit to catch it. And he says, "Snap!" Which I didn't know was a word that was being used like it is today, back in the 80s. I still say "oh snap" sometimes. He says that Joey still has a good throw on him for all his talk of getting older. Another kid says that he'd be playing for the Seattle Seahawks if he could throw like Joey, despite being in Oregon, but I can't pretend to know anything about who from where can play in which American football team. Maybe he's just a fan of theirs. Joey thinks to himself that those kids always think that he's something special, just because he can toss a ball. And while he's lost in thought, someone else greets him, this time calling him Senor Slick. So we had Mr. Kim, who's Korean, Clyde, who was black, and now someone speaking Spanish. So I guess they're showing us that this is a multicultural area of Portland, and Joey is popular with everyone. We've gone from seeing him as a loser in trouble with the mob for blowing money he owes to a crime lord on horses, to finding out that maybe he's a criminal with a heart of gold because everyone seems to love him. This new lady offers him some menudo soup, which Google says is Mexican, so maybe she is too. She says she's worried about him and that he needs to take better care of himself. He thanks her for her concern, but says maybe he'll come by for soup another time. He's tired right now. He goes into his apartment, which is the stereotypical, run-down, old place. The plaster on the wall has a big hole in it, so you can see the wooden slats of the building showing, and Joey says aloud that he worries about himself too. He's worried that he'll always be a good-for-nothing nobody and have to live in shoddy apartments like this one. Maybe he'll always have to be an errand boy for people like Lomax, and even that he can't do right. All he has, he says, is the gun he found, and he doesn't know what to do with it. He says Marco, the lackey, was right. He really is a loser. He holds the gun, trigger up, so carefully in his hand like he's about to use it to shatter the mirror. And he yells that he's sick of looking at his own face. But, exasperated, he drops his hands and sighs. Breaking the mirror isn't going to fix anything. He'd still be a loser. I get the sense that, because of the previous scene, we're supposed to feel for Joey here, but it just doesn't quite work for me. Sure, he has friends in the neighborhood and some self-esteem problems, but he's in with the mob, and he gambles on horses. I can't quite feel sorry for him, really. He talks to the gun again. People have been doing that a lot in this one. He tells the gun/Megatron that maybe it/he can change things for him. But then he says, nah, what would someone like him do with a gun? He knows about Megatron's robot form, and that he'll obey any command that he gives him at this point too, so it's weird that he doesn't mention that here. He hears footsteps on the stairs outside his apartment. He looks out of the window, and he sees a car that's too fancy to be in this neighborhood, and he figures that someone's coming to find him already. He grabs the gun and decides to make a run for it. Just in time too, because a foot kicks open his door, and Whitey, Marco, and 2 others bust in with their guns drawn. They find the place empty, and quickly realize that it's too small for Slick to be hiding anywhere in there, but they see the curtain flapping and the open window, and they decide to use it to climb onto the fire escape outside. Marco makes it up to the roof just in time to see Joey dive behind like a small entryway there on the roof. It's kind of like, you know, when the stairs lead up to the door, and for the door to stand up, there's like a kind of triangular piece of wall on either side. Marco calls to Joey and tells him to give himself up, But Joey isn't about to do that. He thinks to himself that he has to do something before they get any closer. They fan out, and Marco calls again, urging Joey to come out. Joey comes out of his hiding place, and once again talks to the gun. He asks it/Megatron to take them out, and Megatron aims and fires himself at the water tower directly behind the group of men. It collapses, soaking them all, and the force of the water, knocks all of them out. So they're there on the roof, all clearly visible, and just not smashed to a pulp by the wooden water tower, which has just fallen down and burst apart into planks. The US comics always make sure to show you that nobody was injured badly. How is this physically possible? But anyway, Joey stands right next to them and says, "Hey, it worked. They're all out cold. I did it." For all the ways for this to have gone, this is just nonsensical, isn't it? But it's not uncommon for a story to have someone be hit once, though usually it's punched, fall over, and then just be out of the fight entirely without regaining consciousness or getting up again. Knockout by getting splashed with water is a new one. I've never seen this before. And you could argue, maybe the water knocked them down and then they bumped their heads. But all of them bumping their heads hard enough to knock themselves out? You know the drill by now. Transform and roll with it. 19 minutes later, Joey is driving a red car, thinking about where he can go that Lomax won't find him. He wants to rest and figure out his next move. But he thinks again. He can't relax. Lomax isn't going to stop hounding him. But even as he thinks so, he pulls into a motor court, which, for anyone like me who didn't know what that is, it's like a cheap and small place to sleep. So he stops there to rest for the night, thinking that he should be safe there. He goes to the check-in, and the old guy there says it's $17.50 for the night, up front. Joey discovers that he's $2 short, but the man has no sympathy and says, "Sorry, Mac," and he tells Joey to come back if he wins the lottery. Going back to the car and turning his new gun in his hands, Joey is furious that he can't even afford a bed for the night, thanks to Lomax. He decides no more. He's not going to keep pinching pennies. "You and me, Gun," he says, "we're going to earn ourselves some room and board." He keeps calling it Gun, even though Megatron has introduced himself as Megatron, but yep, this story's weird. In the last panel, Joey's red car pulls into a 24-hour convenience store, which says 612 on it, so it's a little joke there on 7-Eleven. It is right next to a diner too, which I guess he's going to have to hope is either empty or full of people who don't notice what he's about to do. He walks in, hesitating, as he talks to the clerk there. He says he doesn't want any trouble, so they should just give him the money. The clerk stammers, "Sure, mister, you got it." Smart. Just hand over the money. Slick leaves, amazed at how easy that was. But minutes later, he sees a police car with its lights flashing in his rearview mirror and realizes that the cashier must have called them. He leans out of the window and talks to the gun again. He tells the gun to punch him out, and Megatron fires on the tires of the police car, which swerves into some rocks, before landing back down hard on its bonnet. And in the final panel, we can see that the police inside it are, of course, fine, and they clamber out, calling for backup. One of the cops gets a name here too. He's Ralston. No need for it. Just another in Budiansky's lineup of named bit characters we'll never ever see again. Joey makes his getaway, thinking that the cops were shaken, but they'll be fine. On a bridge in the distance, though, he sees two more cars with their sirens and lights on, driving behind a gasoline tanker truck. Once again, he aims Megagun out of the car's window and asks him to take care of it. But this time, by collapsing the bridge, by blowing up the oil tanker. So, we don't see the driver of the oil tanker die, but surely they were burned to death. That's horrible. The police cars manage to come to a stop before they fall from the now destroyed bridge. Joey, for some reason, gloats that now the cops know that he's not someone to be taken lightly. He says, "Come on, Gun, you and me are going places." Again, calling Megatron Gun. He has told you his name. It's just rude. And now it's time for a montage. Over the next few weeks, Joey Slick goes on a one-man crime spree. With Megatron in his hands, Joey feels like there's nothing he can't do. He has everything he's ever dreamed of. Wealth, women, fame, and power. There's a panel of him holding up a jewelry store, and once again shooting the wheels off a police car. A newspaper headline says that a gold shipment was hijacked, and then there's a picture of Joey and a woman standing next to what looks like a car that's plated in gold? So it looks like he stole that gold and then used it to cover a car? What the hell? It says there's always more whenever Joey wants it, and now, wearing what looks like a golden suit, he's robbing a bank. He tells Megatron to take out the security cameras, which he does in less than a second. Two of the bystanders in the bank whisper to each other. "It's him, the man with the supergun, the one the newspapers are talking about." "Come on, doll," Joey says, pointing his gun at the cashier, who's piling money into a suitcase. "It's not every day you're robbed by a living legend." Moments later, he steps outside and is shocked to find a huge number of people waiting for him, along with a tank. He realizes he must have walked into a trap. But, he says, "You and me, gun, we'll walk right out." One of the waiting army members tells him to drop his gun, and they won't shoot. But Joey taunts them, asking if all of them are afraid of one little gun. He says to Megatron that he knows what to do. Blast him! And there's a zap and a big explosion. And then at the top of the next page, there are 2 tanks surrounded by soldiers getting up from being knocked over. One tank is smoking, and Joey's walking away into the foreground, saying that he has other things to do right now. The next day, we're back with Lomax, who is getting a massage from Charlene this time. He's reading the paper, and he's furious to read about Slick's exploits there. He tells his henchmen that they had 2 chances to stop him, and that they failed both times. Now, all the other gang bosses are laughing at Lomax, because they know about that. He crumples up the pages of the paper in both of his hands, and he looks like he's screaming. He's clearly extremely angry, and he says that Slick won't be on top for long. He let those soldiers live, just like everyone else he's tangled with, and that shows that he's soft. But, Lomax says, "I'm not." When he finds Slick, he's going to kill him, and he says he'll do it without the help of any of you screw-ups, and all of his goons are kind of looking down at the floor like they're ashamed of themselves. Being yelled at by this guy in just a towel, who has quite an impressive dad bod going on there. Wow. At the same time, in a luxurious penthouse apartment, Joey is telling his new friends that he's, quote, "getting sick of your ugly faces." He tells them to find something else to do for a while. One of the women protests that they were supposed to be going out that night, and the guy in the suit says that they were going to discuss their next job. This sets Joey off. He says, "Our next job. I do all the work." Which is not true. Megatron is pretty much doing all the important parts, but he's not about to admit to that. He says that all of them have been mooching off him for months, and he sends them all out. Once they're gone, he complains aloud that they're only interested in him because he has money, and they'd drop him in a second if he weren't so wealthy. He sets Megatron on the floor and asks him to transform. He wants to talk to someone he can trust, he says. Megatron has to hunch over to fit inside the apartment, which must have extraordinarily strong floors. He says Megatron is the only person he knows that he can trust, and that Megatron is the one who enabled him to get all this wealth. But it isn't how he thought it would be. He got everything he wanted, but it hasn't made him happy. He says he doesn't feel anything. Megatron is the only one he feels he can talk to, and Megatron is as brainless as a beer can. So surely there's something wrong here, right? Moments later, he appears outside the apartment building with Megatron in gun mode in his hand, and he tells everyone to leave. Which he'd already done once, but I guess there were more people there. He goes back to his old neighborhood, and right away, he feels better. Stepping out of his solid gold car, he says hello to Mr. Kim, who says he's surprised to see him around here now that he's such a big shot. Ha, get it? Big shot? Nice one, Mr. Kim. Joey puts a hand on his shoulder and asks him what advice he has for him today. Mr. Kim says, Nothing. Here, take an apple. Anything you want, please." He's clearly heard about Joey's crimes and he's frightened of him now. Joey looks, well, I think he's supposed to be looking saddened in this small panel here, but it just looks like he's aged about 20 extra years for a second. And he says, no thanks, Mr. Kim. He walks along the street, wondering if he really has changed so much that Mr. Kim was this terrified of him. He spots the kids he played ball with before, and he asks how tomorrow's NFL pros are doing. They say, football is for losers. The real money is in robbing banks, right, Mr. J? One of them asks him to show them his super gun, and he thinks to himself, with that same old man face again, that they're treating him like he's Al Capone, and he doesn't like it at all. The kids who once looked up to him for his sports skills are now taking after him again, but this time they want to follow his example and become career criminals. Well, he thinks, it's time for me to wake up. 20 minutes later, he pulls up outside Lomax's place, and we get his forename this time too. He's Jake Lomax. And Joey thinks, he's the one who got me into this mess, and now he's going to be the one to get me out of it. Every time I record an episode, this happens. Every time. Maybe I'll leave it in, just evidence. This time. Every time. He rings the gate intercom and tells Lomax who he is and that they have business to discuss. Lomax, who has been looking for him this whole time, is polite enough and pleased to have him deliver himself right to him on his doorstep. So he tells him to come in and that he's been looking forward to speaking to him. From his office, Lomax sends 2 goons to give Slick his special greetings. And Joey comes in through the gates, thinking that he hadn't expected this politeness from Lomax. He notices movement on the roof and realizes that Lomax has sent a welcoming party for him. He asks Megatron to take them out, and he fires on the place on the roof where the man is standing, which collapses. He does the same with 2 others who are perched elsewhere too. Eventually, Lomax himself makes his way to the courtyard, and for the first time this whole issue, Megatron misses. But that could have been intentional on Joey's part there. He tells Lomax that the wall he hit with the shot could easily have been his fat face, and he tells him to drop his gun. Lomax immediately does, and begs Joey not to shoot him. So, yeah, maybe Lomax really has been out of this game for a while now, because, not coming off as the toughest guy right this moment. Shoot you, Slick says, pointing his gun at him. Now that's an idea. He pulls the trigger, and rather than telling Megatron to shoot this time, he exclaims, how about that? The trigger doesn't work. But that's fine. He didn't really want to kill Lomax. Or anyone else for that matter. He never even liked carrying a gun anyway. Anyway, he says, he doesn't need a gun to take care of a crud like Lomax. Okay. And he tosses it aside. Lomax stammers, You're not going to kill me? When Megatron hits the ground, he fires a bullet, which startles Joey, who comments on it before punching Lomax in the face and telling him, no, he's not going to kill him. Once Lomax is laid out on the floor, Joey throws a bundle of money at him. He says he's going to pay back what he owed, plus interest. So now they're even. He tells Lomax he can use his money to fix up the damage to his house. But then a giant shadow falls across the courtyard. It's Megatron. And Joey says that too. Megatron! So he does know his name. He asks why Megatron transformed without being ordered to do so. Megatron is offended that Joey would even suggest that he controls Megatron. Nobody tells him what to do, especially not a human. He tells him that he's going to kill him for that insult, and he fires his fusion cannon at Joey. But Slick dives out of the way just in time. Megatron is surprised to see that he survived, but threatens once again to kill him by reducing him to a bubbling pool of protoplasm. Joey stammers that Megatron usually only listens to him. How is this happening? And there's a close-up of Megatron's face, looking pretty peculiar, as he explains that by throwing him on the ground just now, he reconnected the circuits that had previously been severed by his fall from the cliff. Now, once again, Megatron is in control of himself. But Megatron gives no thanks. He only takes. And now, I take your life, fleshling. Even in this story of questionable quality, Budiansky managed to give Megatron some perfect lines. I'll at least give him that. Joey stammers, my life? And then has some kind of manic episode or something? He says he was terrified of Lomax, but he came over here anyway, and he punched his lights out. Nothing Megatron can do to him now can take that away from him, so he can just do what he wants. Lomax turned out to be quite a frail old man, and Megatron could stomp you into paste, so I have no idea what Slick is thinking here. Even more strange, Megatron is impressed by this display of disconnection from reality. That's not what he says. He says that such audacity is surprising to see in a human, and for that, Joey deserves Megatron's respect. What the French toast. Transform and roll with it again. Don Perlin is a new penciler this issue, and he hasn't had to draw Megatron so many times. The close-ups he's done of Megatron's face are so odd. They make him look like he's salivating an awful lot. I think his mouth is supposed to be kind of this like metal grate thing. It's weird. I don't like it. This part is lunacy. He lets Joey go with the warning that if he ever issues a command to Megatron again, he will die. Megatron turns around and says, now I must go. I have a war to win. And he just walks off into the distance. Joey, too, just strides out of the mansion grounds, thinking how lucky he is to be alive. But the police have arrived, having heard the reports of the damage to the mansion, and they recognize Joey as the guy with the super gun. They arrest him on the spot, and they tell him they've got him before he can draw his gun. But he says he's going to cooperate, and that he doesn't have that gun anymore. Maybe you can even tell us how Lomax's house got ruined, one of the officers says. Joey agrees to do that, and then another police officer points to the distant, retreating form of Megatron. Joey says, oh, that used to be mine, but then I found out it wasn't my style. And that's the end of our adventure with Joey Slick. Now that it's over, I can finally tell you my beef with this story, and I bet you can probably guess what it is, but it was billed as the wildest Transformers story yet, and I would contest that because this was not a Transformers story at all. This was just a really, really bland gangster story about a guy who gets his hands on a gun for the first time. And this was the return of Megatron too. This is how Budiansky decided to put Megatron back into the fold, in this weird, contrived story where he's powerless and at the whim of a petty criminal. And for all that nonsense, Megatron was barely in this anyway. which is lucky for Don Perlin, who draws his face just so weirdly. And when Megatron was in this story at all, he made really weird, out-of-character choices in response to an already very weird bit of dialogue, and then just walked off. I cannot salvage this story for you. I cannot say anything positive about it, beyond that Megatron did have a few good lines in there, and I do quite like Lomax. This is the first of all these comics that I've read that I just felt was really bad. Irredeemably bad. Like, skippably bad. You don't need to read this. The entire story is a chain of baffling decisions from Budiansky. The only solace I can find for myself is that the reason I didn't like this is because it wasn't about Transformers. And that makes it out of place in this series and by definition a bad Transformers comic, because it isn't a Transformers comic. I held it back until the very end, and I'm sorry to end another episode on a downer, but by the Matrix, what nonsense. I couldn't believe what I had just read when I had finished this one. Like, why did he write this? And why did he write it like this? I really hope that this was an outlier, because it does focus on human characters. And actually, I have no problem with that, if they're characters we know about. But Slick was just some random guy. Not even an interesting random guy, or someone we could sympathize with. And he's just been arrested too, so I highly doubt we're ever going to see him again. But I would just much rather have read a whole issue about Bomber Bill getting home and getting to see his kids than whatever this mess was. So that's our episode for today. I feel bad when I end them on a down note like this. But since I've been on a trip, I can give you a peek behind the curtain and say that I have read the next 2 issues and written the notes for those. One of them is half good, and one of them is weird, but I really like that one. So after I read this, I felt like, oh no, are they just going to get rubbish? Am I going to stop enjoying these for the rest of the 4 giant tomes that I've got? And no. Thankfully, we do get back on track pretty quickly. But what a weird issue. But not weird enough to be fun or funny, just rubbish. Sorry, Bob. I don't know why you did this or what you thought you were doing, but nah. Didn't stick the landing for me. Oh well. On to better things soon. All that's left for me to do is to do the end credits and the shout-outs and the things that I always do. So first of all, thank you to my Patreon supporters, Mel and Corey, for giving me a few bucks this month to help support the show. I appreciate it more than either of you will probably ever know. If you would like to help out and support the show, you can find the Patreon at patreon.com/Transformers AutoBook Club. There, you can become an Auto Bestie or a Decepticon Padre for $3 or more a month. So far, though, there's no Patreon benefits that everybody on the podcast platforms and YouTube page don't get. And that's something I had hoped to rectify while I was away in Korea, but I just didn't have time. Really, it's just a way for you to show your support, and any money that I do make goes back into the show by buying me time off from chores during the week, which gives me time to write more notes and to prepare images, edit audio, and slap it all together into a video. You can also help the show out for free though. If you are watching on YouTube, you can give the video a like, a comment, share it around to your friends, and of course you can subscribe if you haven't done that already. If you're a podcast listener, you can help out by leaving a review on your podcast platform of choice. And also, if you happen to have not done it yet, you can go over to the YouTube page, which is youtube.com/Transformers AutoBook Club, and give me a sub anyway, even if you don't plan to watch the videos. It just boosts up the numbers and then helps YouTube to let more people know about this show. If you're interested in hearing about other comics I have read, you can find me on Blue Sky, which is at Clarion Comics JP. And if you fancy chatting with me, some previous guests, and some listeners too, you can join us on our Discord, the link to which will be in the description, or you can follow this QR code if you're watching the video to find us there too. That's all for this time. I hope you'll join me next week. But until then, and as always, take care, be kind, and do good. Till all are one.